A lot of people quibble when it comes to journalistic etiquette, especially in light of the changing face of the 21st century's new media platforms. But one thing most folks can agree upon is that it's very important to try as hard as you can not to spit up all over your guests. Of course, it would have been nice if somebody had actually ever taught me this. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, and yeah, it's true, I was taking a drink during today's panel, and David Hayter said something so hilarious that I managed to spit out all my water all over Josh Olson, possibly spraying Hayter as well, for which I again apologize to both of them. But hey, Comic-Con was very crazy this year, and I was very happy to have put together a great panel, including a history of violence writer Josh Olson, Watchmen co-writer David Hayter, and Senior VP of Creative Affairs for DC Comics, Gregory Noveck. And I guess while we're talking about outright mistakes, it should also be noted that I, in my sleep-deprived state, congratulated Olson on being the first screenwriter to have been Oscar-nominated for adapting a graphic novel. Olson correctly pointed out that Ghost World creator and co-writer Daniel Close, along with co-writer and director Terry Zwigoff, were actually the first folks nominated for adapting a graphic novel, and upon further reflection, and after catching up on some sleep, it's important to note that Sherry Springer Berman and Robert Pulcini were also nominated for adapting the graphic novel of American Splendor. Of course, I knew all that. Moving forward, make sure to check back as I did a lot of recording down at Comic-Con for my own purposes, and if you're lucky, and if I have time, I will try and mix and post some of it online. And let me just say, it's pretty amazing stuff. In other news, I finally joined Facebook and Twitter, so you can now see some of the cool things that I was seeing at Comic-Con by checking that stuff out. And I'm even able to post video from Twitter, which is pretty cool. So just follow Yo Goldsmith, all one word, on Twitter. Or for folks without a Twitter account, just use the link www.twitter.com/YoGoldsmith. As for Facebook, you could just type Jeff Goldsmith into Facebook, where I set up a page you could become fans of, and anyone could get full access to the fan page on Facebook, members and non-members alike. Now again, for the record, I'm not some egomaniac that thinks he deserves fans. I'm just keeping my personal account personal on Facebook, which means rather than you becoming a quote friend and then seeing all my mother's crazy rants about how I still can't keep my room clean, you could become a quote fan and skip all that and just chat with me. Anyhow, I'm looking forward to continuing to see what all this internet ruckus is all about. Of course, don't forget to keep an eye out for Creative Screenwriting Magazine's latest issue at Barnes & Noble and Borders bookshops in the United States, Canada, the UK, Western Europe, and of course, Australia. And you can find out all about what's in the latest issue by visiting www.creativescreenwriting.com. But hey, let's talk about swag again for a second. At my screenings, when people get trivia questions correct, I give them free posters that the screenwriters sign afterwards. And now, here's your chance as a podcast listener to get some swag as well. How's about a free audiobook? That's right, you could choose one of 40,000 different audiobooks as a free digital download by using the following link. Ready? Here it is. www.audiblepodcast.com/screenwrite. That's Audible, spelled AUDIBLE, podcast.com/screenwrite, spelled SCREENWRITE. So people all over the world can use the site itself, but only USA and Canadian listeners can take advantage of this deal, whereby after using that link, all you have to do is sign up for a 14-day free trial membership for the Audible Listener Gold monthly plan, and then you will be able to test drive the site by downloading one free audiobook of your choice. The cool part is that even if you decide to cancel the plan within 14-day trial period, the audiobook you downloaded is still yours to keep. Obviously, there's Michael Haig's Screenwriting for Hollywood or Robert McKee's Story, which are both solid choices, and Story is read by the one and only McKee himself for a runtime of 6 hours. Or the equivalent of 6 of my podcasts these days. As for comic book related stuff, there's a really amazing book that came out recently that they have entitled The 10-Cent Plague, The Great Comic Book Scare and How It Changed America by David Hayter. This is all about the very true congressional movement in the 1950s to ban comic books, and this movement very nearly broke a few major publishers. It's a hell of a book proving that the truth really is stranger than fiction often when you consider how preposterous the successful movement actually was. You could also tune into a dramatized version of Superman, Doomsday and Beyond from the BBC, or even listen to comic books from superheroes to manga. There's plenty of possibilities, amigos, and remember, it's all a part of a 14-day free trial period that allows you to download one book to keep even if you cancel your free trial membership during that 14-day period. The link again is www.audiblepodcast.com/screenwrite. And if you're still looking for more cool things to do online, don't forget to catch this week's Film Spotting podcast with hosts Adam Kempenaar and Maddie Robinson at filmspotting.net. Over there, you'll find film reviews, interviews, and a lot of the cinematic chatter that you crave. But now, without further ado, let's jump right onto the stage of my sold-out 2009 Comic-Con panel, right as I introduced my distinguished guests. Give a warm round of applause for Mr. Josh Olson, the writer of History of Violence. And please, when you ask questions, you have to say Mr. Josh Olson, and he does refer to himself in the third person. Sitting next to him is good old David Hayter, the co-writer of The Watchmen.
You're fantastic.
And of course, Senior VP of Creative Affairs at DC Comics, Gregory Noveck. All right, so we're going to start moderated, then we're going to open it up to the crowd for questions. So think of a few. Josh, David, I've interviewed you guys multiple times before. It's still in iTunes, but I want to talk about how you both took very different approaches that led to success. I truly believe that what William Goldman said, that nobody knows anything, is 100% true. There's no one way to write a screenplay. What's so interesting about you two sitting on the panel together is, Josh, infidelity to the material led to your success, whereas David, complete and utter fidelity to the material led to your success.
Not really.
Pretty damn close, man. Of course, you get co-writer credit with Alex Say, who was not able to make it down to Comic-Con, but wanted us to say hi.
Yeah.
Talk about, Josh, coming into that meeting and knowing that you needed to get away from the source material and how sometimes that's okay.
Well, it's not that by the way, I don't like talking about infidelity when my girlfriend's sitting right over
You
there.
totally cheated on your movie.
Yeah, I did. I cheated on John Wagner. I've told the story before. It's I'd read the book when it came out. Thought it was great fun. A couple years later, the opportunity came up to go pitch for the job of adapting it at New Line. I had just broken into the studio system. And the executive there...
No mean feat that, I should say.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No mean feat,
Yes.
breaking into the studio system.
I just saw the script at Paramount.
Which was Three Gun Blues.
Yeah, which actually I was very infidelious to the Three Musketeers. It's a remake of the Three Musketeers, or an adaptation of the Three Musketeers as modern-day LAPD. And
Three Musketeers with guns.
Yes, exactly. And Twitter.
Nice.
I think they tweet in it. I think I don't even know what Twitter is, so I'm obsessed with it. But I was
Well, once you figure it out, I'm on
Yes,
there, buddy.
we'll
I'm
tweet
waiting.
later, dude.
I'm waiting for you.
So I was brought in because one of the executives there knew me, was a fan of my work, and told me up front, look, you're not getting this job. We're only talking to 3 or 4 A-list writers. They're all friends of the head of the studio. But come in, be charming, make them like you. And that way I can bring you back for something where you do have a chance. And I thought, great, so I'll do all this work for nothing. So I went back and read the book again, realized it was not a film I particularly wanted to make. I mean, doesn't mean I didn't want to see it. I love Watchmen, no desire whatsoever. Certain things you don't want to tear off.
That's good advice.
But it did bring up kind of ideas that were interesting to me as a writer, and I love the title, I love the premise. And I thought, screw it, I went in and I basically stole liberally from the book, took the setup, took the title, and kind of told my own story. And it turned out that they really liked that. So it was a valuable lesson because, there's a tendency as a writer, especially when you're starting out, to want to please people. And you walk into a job, a meeting or pitch, going, "Oh, I hope I get this," without sort of thinking about whether or not I want to do this. And that'll kill you, because eventually, if you do get the job by pitching something you think they want as opposed to what you want, you end up writing something that you don't want. And it was an incredibly valuable lesson, because I think from when I handed in the script to when we were standing at the Palais in Cannes for the premiere was, I think, about 13 months, which is ridiculously fast process in Hollywood. I still had to explain to my mother every month why it was taking so long. But, it's just one of those things where just every step of the way I did what I felt was right, what made me happy, and,
Cool.
it kind of worked, yeah.
David, over the years, a lot of people have tried to turn Watchmen into a lot of different things.
Jerks.
You were holding the you were holding the torch for a really long time to remain, very verbatim practically to the source material, which was, as Time magazine said, put on their list of one of the greatest novels of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. Talk about being that torchbearer for so many years.
All right, listen. No, that's not Snake. I was I was literally drinking and having drunken conversations with Gaius Baltar 6 hours ago. So I'm going to sound like Snake whether I want to or not. I'm glad you appreciate it. And don't expect coherence. The point is, you're going to adapt comics to screen. You better be serious. I had this whole conversation. I had dinner with Roger Avery last night, who's a co-writer of Pulp Fiction and is a great writer, and we were talking about adapting things, and we talked about how true Watchmen was to the comic book, and there have been things that I've adapted. In the same style that Josh approached History of Violence, and things where you say, okay, well, what really works and what makes this worthwhile as a film, and then you keep that and you shore up the rest, or you make up the rest. But with Watchmen, it's so beautifully executed. It's so perfect in many ways that it was like one reviewer was talking about I was adapting I'm adapting Dead World, which is a graphic novel series, and they said, well, thank you, and they said and some reviewers said, well, it's David Hayter, so it's just going to be word for word, and it's like, well, no, if it's Watchmen, it may be word for word, because that's a pretty amazing piece of material. There are sequences and exchanges and dialogue and storylines that I just that you couldn't do better, and so you, but as you all know, I helped change the ending and did
we'll get to that.
Right, which were different, and so it just depends on the material that you're adapting. If it's exceptionally strong material, I think you stay close to it because you don't want to take something that has really touched so many people and screw it up. If it's something that really needs a lot of work, then you put in the work and you create your own thing. But Watchmen was not like that. It was really my desire to take this incredible story that had been beloved by the comic book buying audience, which I know there are a lot of us here, especially this weekend. But that's really...
Especially that guy.
Especially this guy here.
The box office.
And that's about this much of the audience versus this much of the movie-going audience. And so, it's just a real joy to take those scenes and sort of bring them to people who have never seen them before, and why... I just didn't want to make up my own Watchmen. How do you even do that?
I'm very glad you did not.
Yeah.
Gregory.
We're all glad.
Noveck, explain just once again your job as a film liaison between DC Comics and Warner Brothers, and your views on fidelity versus taking liberties of the material that you're kind of assigned to protect.
Right. Well, first of all, I've had the chance to work with both these guys, and they're amazing and talented and really fun. So that's the fun part of my job, is I get to work with talented people. How many of you went to see the Watchmen Director's Cut thing last night? A couple of you? How many of you saw Green Lantern First Flight? Ah, all right, cool. The rest of you have to buy it Tuesday, July 28th. It's my job is, it's fascinating. It's a lot of fun because, as I worked in the industry as an executive and a producer for a lot of years, but everywhere I went, I was always the comic book sci-fi guy, or the guy who read books too. Depends on the company. And so when I came to DC, it was like, great, I get to play with all these properties, and I get to tell people, don't fuck it up. And then they made Catwoman, so I was like, okay, they're not.
Were you there when they made Catwoman?
I started as they were going into production, so I had nothing to do with that movie.
All right.
The only thing that I was able to influence was, they kind of realized fairly early on that they were kind of, they knew regardless of the property that they didn't have the best script in the world, and we, man.
I'm sorry. I was thinking of something funny.
And we managed to get Jim Lee up there to do some, sketches of Halle Berry, which he enjoyed, and that was all good. But really, it's interesting because these guys are right. When you have a piece of material like Watchmen, for example, which is a single story, it's a linear story. So you kind of know where you're starting, you kind of know where you're going to end. There are things in the adaptation that you have to, streamline or alter or succinctly, combine just to get the narrative going in a different medium. Then, on the other hand, when you're looking at something like a Batman, which has 75 years of stories, or conversely, we're producing a movie at Summit called Red, where you're talking about a 3-issue mini that is basically Act 2 of the movie. You got to really add a lot. So then it becomes figuring out, well, what is the through line? Is Chris Nolan's version of Batman any more true to the character than Bruce Timm's version of Batman? Or is it any more valid than Tim Burton's initial visualization of Batman? No, they are all perfectly valid, strong, brilliant, often interpretations of those characters. What you want to avoid, is the Joel Schumacher interpretation of Batman.
But it's important.
And he got away with 3 of them. So.
But it's important to note. We're living in a renaissance of comic book films right now, and we're a shoe drop away from Catwoman or some of those Batman films that were very studio influenced and not really catering to the creative process or the integrity of the project. So
my biggest thing coming into the gig, and I've been there almost 6 years now, has been to try and convince my colleagues, at the studio level that look, all the people in this room have a voice, and it's an important voice, because it's not just about numbers. It's about all of us here have a certain affinity for this kind of material, and if it's right and if it's wrong, and it's not anything you can quantify. It's not anything you can point to and say, well, if they make the cape that long, they totally don't get the character. But that if Batman pulls out a gun and blows somebody away in the head, it's probably not Batman. So there's things like that, and I think that the studio has become, at least Warner Brothers, who I work with a lot, has become very sensitive to understanding those issues. We've been developing Green Lantern for a while, and we're on a really good road there, and it's like, I cannot tell you the amount of conversations I've had that have been both about educating the people involved, like, here's why a green ring that can make anything happen is really frickin' cool. And here's why the universe, which yes has 150 billion galaxies, but it's really split up into 3,600 sectors, because that's the DC universe, which is a different physical construct than our universe.
But does it have to be green?
Why does it have to? Oh, I've had that conversation. Why does it have to be? Does that always have to be green?
Green doesn't test well.
All the constructs they kind of have to be green. Yes.
I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yes.
It's Green Lantern.
Just to remind people briefly who you are, don't spend a lot of time on this answer, but I've been talking to some podcast listeners here this weekend that kind of gave me a few questions. I just want to remind people that behind all of your success, you've all kind of struggled. Especially these two for sure. Josh, at one point you practically lived... Gregory, I'm not saying you did...
Cake, dude.
No.
It's been a cakewalk for Gregory.
Hold on. I'm getting you, Gregory, but... Josh practically lived in a flop house at one point with pit bulls and drug dealer neighbors. And through your years of success, when I interviewed you in the podcast for History of Violence, you said one thing that we've debated for years, which was that you said you would never want to own a house because you thought a mortgage would ruin your ability to keep your artistic integrity.
Oh, I never said I never wanted to own a house.
You said you...
Slight difference.
Okay.
Slight difference.
And now, here you are years later, sir, as a homeowner.
Yeah.
And I want to know, how's that working out?
It's working out great.
And just talk about coming from the flop house to the big house, Olson, to the big house.
No, that's prison.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, kind of.
The prison of screenwriting.
Oh no, I'm in this room right now. With this guy standing behind me. What do you want me to say?
Just the struggle. I mean, like keeping the artistic integrity alive. You were seriously convinced if you got a house that you were going to lose something.
For a long time. Yeah, no, absolutely.
You said it multiple times.
Sure, yeah. So I made it. No. Here was the concern, and I think you missed this: is you don't want to get to a point where you're servicing a beast other than your desire to write and make films, because. I was talking about I lived in an apartment for a long, long time, well after people were telling me, including my business manager, get a house. And then the point was, I'd see people go off and they buy some monstrosity, and then everything changes because now they have to service that thing, and you end up taking, the worst jobs in the world to do that. So I didn't buy a house until I had well enough socked away that, I could stop working for 5 years if I wanted to. So it doesn't drive me to work. And that was the important thing, was making sure that what motivates you to work is your desire to work,
cool,
not your need to pay rent or something. But there's a tendency in Hollywood, people tend to think that the first really big paycheck they get is going to be a paycheck they get every week for the rest of their lives. So they start, the first time you start making that kind of money, you start spending that kind of money, and you buy cars and you buy houses and you start flying around the world doing this ridiculous shit, and then you wake up one day and they're not paying you that anymore. So I've always been very conservative about what I do with my bread, because I want to keep working. That's the important thing.
Cool.
But it's basically, to me, you always want to be in a position, and I got this phone call years ago, shortly after here, when they call up and say, would you be interested in writing Transformers? You want to be able to say, go fuck yourself.
Is that what you said?
It's probably a little more polite than that. By the way, how many people here went to see Transformers 2? Okay, if you're sitting next to someone who raised their hand, hit them. Seriously, because you guys are why movies are so hard to make. Because for all the stuffs Greg...
Easy there.
Oh, I'm serious. I mean, for everything Greg's saying about going after these meetings and talking about the integrity of Green Lantern and everything, at the end of the day, the studios know it doesn't fucking matter. There's an audience out there for big, loud, and dumb, and they really don't care about the quality of the things. And they'll go see it 2 or 3 times.
I have to weigh in. I will say that the day after Transformers 2 opened, I got several calls from producers and studio executives and agents and writers saying, so, what's DC got like in the big robot arena? And I was like, well, look, we got stuff, but, have you read Ambush Bug? It's really cool. It's a great movie, way better.
Seriously.
I mean, look, writers, I think artists, Josh accepted, are not known for their business acumen, so they will go and spend the cash, and I think it was Shakespeare that said that no one but a fool ever wrote for money, if I'm misquoting that, but,
No, that's all I write for.
There you go.
But it's true. There's when a movie like that makes that kind of money, it affects the way the studios look at the movies they want to make. And I mean, and here's the thing: these are not evil people. They're not sitting there going, "All right, we'll shove more crap down their throat." They just are responding to what they perceive the audience wants. And when they see that a movie like Transformers makes $300 trillion, and a movie like Hurt Locker is dying out there in spite of getting the best reviews of the year.
Great film.
Everybody who raised their hand earlier, bow and scrape before the people who are clapping. We can all sit here and try to do the best we can, and throw our hearts and souls into these projects. But the more you keep feeding these monstrosities, the harder it gets to do good work. If you're, I have no idea. I hope the Green Lantern movie's great, but if it comes out horrible, there's a good chance a lot of that is because there's pressure to turn it into Transformers. Turn it into a movie that is not what they call execution dependent. Because they don't want execution-dependent movies. They want movies that any schmuck will go see. And you got to stop.
All right, we're going to keep talking about integrity. I want to move down really quick because I want to get back to this because I still want to get some other history of violence questions later too. Hayter, somebody pointed out to me the one thing I missed in our 90-minute Watchmen podcast that we did was in the years you were struggling before you started answering phones for Bryan Singer, which led to you getting screenwriting credit on X-Men as a very...
It was just that easy.
It was just that easy. No, but you had made an independent film, and you said you were really scraping by in the 90s, and it was really tough. How did Solid Snake help keep you afloat? No, but really, because you did leave that out, and of course they all asked me if you do the voice.
If I can't help but do the voice. Don't ever go drinking with guys.
But how did you end up on that gig, and how did it keep you afloat?
I just auditioned for it, and in '97 I made a movie called Burn, which none of you have seen, and that year I made $1,700. That was my income for '98 when I was sort of traveling the world, going to film festivals, and promoting my film, and then I was up. This story is full of names and such. I was at a house where the Counting Crows were recording This Desert Life, their third album, because they're friends of mine, and I was hanging out, and Jennifer Hale, who's a big voiceover actress, amazing actress, and an old friend of mine calls me up and said, somebody's going to be making some money. And I was like, is it me? Because that would really be cruel if it wasn't. And she said, no, it's Chris Zimmerman just told me that you got cast as the lead in this video game. And I was like, fantastic. And Metal Gear, well, they didn't pay me a huge amount the first go round, but enough that I sort of got back on my feet and had enough. I was able to buy some food and had enough strength to go beg Brian for a job answering the phones on X-Men. And so it really did, sort of lead to that thing. But yeah, Metal Gear came together at the same time as X-Men. So, it's a bizarre thing, this industry. You work and you work and you work and you suffer and you get nothing for it. And you think, I've put in all this effort for nothing. And many of the things that you love and that you work on and slave on don't come to anything, and you think, boy, I'm just really spinning my wheels and wasting my time. And that's where I was in 98. And in 99, I got this video game and started working on X-Men, and by 2000, suddenly I was a huge screenwriter and asking for all this money for the next Metal Gear, and it all just turned around. And I tend to look at it as an investment of energy into the business and into the process of sort of honing your artistic voice.
Cool.
And eventually that comes back to you in ways that you just can never anticipate.
Gregory, usually the executive track starts with an internship. We don't get to hear it a lot, but talk about your struggle to become an executive over the years.
Yeah, I PA'd in college as a production assistant on movies and stuff, and I always knew that I was going to head out to LA and work in the business, and my goal was always to end up on the creative side. And when I first got out to LA, I was long-haired, unemployed, but bearing a worthless degree, so that was good. And it was 91, it was the middle of a recession, it was bad, and through a friend, through this girl that I met at CAA, she called me one day, she goes, what do you want to do? And she was an assistant. I said, I want to do what you do, I want to get in. And she goes, well, I know this guy at CBS who I think you'd really like because he's a rebel. And I literally had really long hair down to here. And I went to meet with this guy who was the head of business affairs at CBS. And I knew nothing about being an assistant. I could barely, there was none of these internets that you newfangled kids use. So my knowledge of WordPerfect was not so perfect. But he loved, this guy ran business affairs, which is basically the guys that make all the deals, and he loved the idea of having this long-haired kid on his desk on the executive programming level of CBS, where everyone was career secretaries, you know. It was like all these, you know, older, very prim and proper women, and me with what I thought was professional, which was like these, you know, crazy paisley button-down shirts and, you know, Bugs Bunny ties. And I tied my hair back, you know, I was respectful. And I knew nothing, but very quickly I learned a lot. And they fired me, and I was lucky enough after a couple of gigs to end up working for a guy who became my mentor, is a guy named Rob Keneally, who's now an agent at CA, but for a long time he was an executive. And I ended up working with him when we went to a company called Reicher, which is no longer around. I also have a history of killing companies. And but I started off as assistant, but really there was like this really small, there was no development. So I ended up being the young development guy, basically working with, you know, writers and directors that came in and very quickly sort of, you know, thankfully, in Hollywood you'll have bosses that will just, they make it their primary job to destroy you on their desks. And I'm sure those of you who've seen Swimming with Sharks, it's not a lie, it's basically accurate. I've had those kinds of bosses, but then I was lucky to find a guy who was absolutely confident in himself and just wanted, you know, his whole thing, which I've then extended to my assistants over the years who've worked with me, is, you know, he figures if he trains you and promotes you, that when he's old, you'll take care of him.
Like a Hollywood nursing home.
Absolutely. And, you know, I tell all my assistants, you know, when I train them and I promote them, and eventually I'm like, Lou, you're going to be a big producer, you're going to be a huge executive. When I'm old and worthless, you will give me a production deal. Because I'll need that. Anyway, so
you're keeping the dream alive.
Absolutely.
All
but,
right.
you know, very quickly. So I just, you know, kept doing that. I mean, Hollywood, it's just keep working. You know, you're gonna get fired 1,000 times, and then, you know, you'll work for Joel Silver, and then you end up at DC Comics. It's that quick.
Just that easy. I want to talk about pitching for a second, because we don't always get to talk about it, but since these are pre-existing properties, pitching is a very important part of the process, because you have to come in and give your take. Starting with Josh and David, you're up against a lot of writers, some of whom you respect, some of whom you don't, some of whom you're not even sure who you're up against. What is your process of breaking a pre-existing comic material down into a pitch? Do you beat it out when you walk in with a act 1, 2, 3 pitch? And also, how long do you time your pitches to be? Like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes?
There's
5 minutes is great.
There's no answer to that. I mean, it's everything is its own thing.
So, History of Violence and Monster, how long did you pitch on each of those?
History of Violence, I pitched, I don't know, it was about 10, 15 minutes, but it was you know, you have to kind of break down the whole story and know it. I go into pitches with just a little sheet of, you know, a couple broad beats just to remind myself. I never rehearse them. It kills me to rehearse them, because I feel like, you know how the third time you tell a joke to somebody, it just doesn't feel as funny as the first time you did it. Right?
Yeah,
right?
joke, yeah.
And I remember.
Like, why do you keep telling me this joke?
Yeah,
I know that. I've heard it.
I remember the fact. So the first time I pitched, I didn't know what I was doing. I was reading off of, I had this sheet of paper like this, and I'm sitting here going, "It's the Old West, 1870," and I knew 2 sentences into it, I wasn't getting the job, and I had 5 pages of this shit to read. And I was just, so you have to be prepared to kind of move with your audience and kind of read them. The moment I figured out how to pitch, and I've done really, really well since then, I've gotten almost everything I've pitched for, and set stuff up off pitches, was one day listening to my, at the time, I think 9-year-old nephew describe a movie he'd seen the night before. I think it was Iron Giant, which, by the way, a good movie.
That's a very good movie.
About giant robots.
Yeah, Gregory, remind DC, Iron Giant, remake, a decade later.
Look,
One decade later.
No need to remake it. Just go buy it.
Watch it.
Remake it in black and white.
I still think it's Brad Bird's best film, but I mean, it's in my top 10.
So wait, your nephew?
So anyway, my nephew. Sorry, I'm rambling. You know, you listen to a 9-year-old kid tell you about the movie he saw last night that he's excited about, and he's just, you know, he's all over the place, but his enthusiasm's contagious, and, you know, he'll be going, oh, wait, go back, and then this happened, and then I forgot, and this, and I realized it's really entertaining to watch a kid do that, and I've sort of
So you had him pitch History of Violence?
Yeah, I had him pitch. But that's sort of the attitude I go in with now, is like, I'm gonna, you know, you have license to just go in and tell these people about a great movie you saw last night. You can tell them every cool thing that happens. And that's sort of the approach. So it can take anywhere from 5 to 15, depending on it.
Do you have a leave behind? Some people use
never. I can't
a document that they leave behind in the room?
I can't. It makes me nervous that people will then have a chance to actually see it on the page and realize it sucks. I want them to like go, wow, he was awesome. He was so exciting. Now we'll hire him. And then
it was a blur of words.
Yeah, exactly. But with Monster, I adapted the manga Monster a couple years ago for New Line, which is still sort of sitting in a limbo somewhere. And that was a huge, enormous undertaking because I remember I think it was a 3,700 page graphic novel, technically speaking. And but my pitch for that was with the same executives at New Line I had done History of Violence for, and it was the week after I'd gotten nominated for an Oscar, so it kind of went...
Josh Olson, the only person to have been nominated for an Oscar for writing a comic book adaptation, by the way.
Ghost World get nominated? I think Ghost World got
Ghost World
nominated.
did get nominated.
Yeah, there's a bunch of us.
Second.
Road to Perdition.
Road to Perdition did not get nominated for writing.
I think it was about a week after that, and my executives were called up and said, so we got this thing, and it's about good and evil, and it's kind of cool, and it's based on a manga. You want to do it? And I looked at it, and I called back the next day. I said, sure. And that was my pitch on that one. But it helps to have had a successful film and, a nomination. When you're pitching, I would recommend... Never mind that.
Getting Oscar nominated. David, so your approach to pitching.
Try that.
Give it a shot.
Your approach to pitching and leave behinds.
No leave behinds. They don't. They haven't earned that right.
They only give people a reason to say no.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Right,
yeah,
true.
the more they can read it, the more it's just not a beneficial way to go. As we said in the creative screenwriting podcast, if you're just starting out and you're desperate and you've got something amazing and you feel that's the only way you're going to get the job, well, fine. But what Josh says is exactly right. It's really about your enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is infectious, and they want to feel that you love the movie. And in a way, the course of the story and all the minute details of the story don't matter because they're going to change all those anyways. So what I try to do, I agree with Gregory. A 5-minute pitch is pretty effective. Most of my pitches are 5 to 10 minutes, where I will basically lay out the characters, the arcs, the way they change through the film, the basic story beats. I'm big into structure, so especially for the big genre films, I think that's very important. So I go from the opening to Act 1 to Act 2, the midpoint of Act 2, Act 3, and finale. And I will focus on set pieces and big, the big visual images, because really what they want to know is, how do we sell this film? So if I can pitch them a really exceptional extended trailer, then they will understand how to sell the film. No, I know this sounds cynical, and it is, but it's true. That's what they're looking for, and all of the detail. If you tell a half an hour pitch, you're going to lose them, and plus it allows them to sort of get into the minutiae of what it's going to be before you even get the job, and that's a bad place to be. So I prefer to keep it simple, and then by the time I deliver the first draft, it's got all these details, it's got all these little moments that they didn't know were coming, and all these pieces of dialogue which hopefully work for them, and that's when you really bring out the big guns. So I would rather leave a room after 5 minutes having them go, well, then what else happens? What else happens? And I'm like, well, hire me and you'll find out. And
but just to clarify, some people have said before to not tell the ending. We've had a problem with this at the magazine. We've had somebody say, don't tell them the ending, it'll get you into a second meeting or something. I think that is completely incorrect.
That's
preposterous.
No,
I just wanted to amend that statement, because we've had a lot of letters, not me, one of the stupid teachers that has put something in the magazine once or twice.
Oh, okay. No one has
nothing to do with me.
Then there's a reason. There's a reason they're a teacher.
yeah, what's their quote?
Yeah, exactly. Gregory, we rarely get the...
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's like, if you remember, the ancient film Blue Velvet. There's the scene where Isabella Rossellini walks down the stairs outside naked, and she goes, "He put his disease in me." That's what I want the execs to be like at the end of a pitch.
Right. Yeah.
So then someone could say,
all sort of woozy and naked and diseased. Although I will say,
and then someone could say, "Dude, is that your mom?" Sorry.
Right.
Just continuing the scene in Blue Velvet.
No, I don't know Josh's mom.
No, it's in Blue Velvet.
As well as I should. But the one exception is I spent an hour pitching Watchmen to, well, I won't tell you who, but an executive, and it was it was hilarious because I could tell that he was just like, what's happening? Who's what's a Rorschach? Yeah. And they hired me anyways, but they picked up the movie anyways because they knew it was a big piece of material. But I said, listen, you want to know what Watchmen is? Here's what it is. And I sat down and I did an hour-long pitch, and don't ever do that.
Did you mention the giant blue penis in the pitch?
Yeah, I didn't bring up the penis.
Could have been a quick pitch.
That sounded really strange.
I didn't bring up the penis.
Hold on. All right, slow down.
Let me jump into this really quick.
Gregory, I want to hear your take because we rarely get the executive side. What works in the room, what doesn't work in the room.
I'll tell you.
Hear a pitch.
I mean, the reality of Hollywood, in particular, as opposed to being an independent filmmaker or something, the reality of Hollywood is we're all salesmen. We talk about the pitch. It's not about the creative process that goes into creating the story or later the movie. It's about selling. And I'm on both ends. I hear a million pitches, and then I turn around and I go pitch the studio because I am selling our product. And it's interesting. Every writer has a different way, and a lot of writers. Sadly, there are terrific writers who are death in a room. And then there are people who are phenomenal in a room that when you read their scripts, you go, holy mackerel, why this guy's horrible. Now, these guys happen to be talented at both, which is not easy, but it does lead to success in Hollywood. If you can actually pitch and then actually deliver on your pitch, that's a pretty unique skill. When it comes to pitching, I like to break it down pretty easily. I think you want to walk in, it's excitement, you got to love it, you have to be passionate for it, you have to believe it. And, I like to start off, teaser. I don't even tell them what it's about. It's like, look, here's what we open like this, boom, cool, whatever it is, whether it's action, whether it's comedic, a little bit about the characters, a little bit about, you don't want to give somebody beat by beat the entire movie because they're going to glaze over. The people are in Hollywood because they have no attention span to begin with. Otherwise, they would have gone to like medical school. So especially a Hollywood executive, So you want to get in, you want to get them excited, you want to share your passion and make them understand why you are so passionate, why you believe this will work. And David's absolutely right. Give them the images that will allow them to sell. Give them the hook. I'm trying to think of hooks, and now I can't, of course, remember them. But I'll tell you, I don't know how many of you guys here know Judd Winnick. One of our best comic book writers, and we have this whole line of DCU animated movies. Last year at Comic-Con, we were walking back to the hotel, and he happened to see me on the street, and he's like, I want to tell you about this story I want to do for the animated movies. And he pitched me this thing, literally in about 45 seconds, walking in the elevator. I said, that's awesome, let's do that. So it can be as quickly as that, and as easily as that, if you can just convey the idea, correctly and intelligently, and most importantly, passionately. But everyone in Hollywood's about selling. The director is selling the studio on his vision of the movie. The studio is selling you this thing that they hope that you're going to buy. We're selling, the writers are selling the studio on whether it's an adaptation or original idea, why they believe this should go. And it's that kind of process all the way through. Producers, just to broaden out a little bit, are the only people who end up on a project, a real producer, end up on a project literally from the first spark when they're there with the writer to the last day before it opens in the theaters. And their job is to sell passionately all the way through. That's why these things that take 10 years to happen, usually it's because there's a couple of people at the center who are just waving that standard saying, we want to make this movie.
What's the worst pitch you've ever heard, Gregory?
Oh, dude.
Without giving away a name, I'm not telling you to call someone out, but why was it just absolute fail?
Wow.
Somebody show up in costume?
No, that would have been cool. I got pitched a version where they wanted to reunite the Backstreet Boys as the Blackhawks.
Wait. Yeah. No, wait a minute. You promised me you wouldn't talk about that project that I pitched you.
And they went and sort of,
Didn't
and
mean
and they were
just
going to be in outer space. That was.
Were they gonna battle Menudo?
And I sort of sat there like, well, I thought that's who the bad guy would be, right? And I sat there kind of slack-jawed, and and that's the thing, again, actually I'll tell you, no, the other worst, there are a lot, but this person had put in this immense amount of work and artwork and time and all this stuff, and they had this whole idea of Egg World, and there was like characters like Albeg Eggstein. And they had like designed this whole line of like literally hundreds of people with egg names, and they thought it was going to be like the next I don't know what
The next it would have been the next cool egg movie.
Yeah, exactly. And and you sit there and sometimes it's hard because look your opinion's only as good. It's just an opinion. Not just because I'm in the office doesn't mean that my opinion's worth anything. And in fact, I'm often told it's worth nothing at all. But you sit there sometimes and you're like, man, this person put in so much work into this thing, and they're so passionate, but there's just not a chance in hell.
They could have also used the Beastie Boys song "Eggman" in the background. We're gonna do a lightning round because I want to get questions from the audience. So, guys, give us just your fast initial thoughts because I know this is a tough question, but I want to get two more and then open it up to the crowd from that microphone. Great comics aren't just filled with action. Both of the projects that we're talking about here today, they've worked with great thematic issues at play that are almost existentialist. History of Violence not only examines violence, but also has a serious identity crisis as its theme, and how it affects one's family. Watchmen constantly examines whether or not mankind is worth saving from the divergent viewpoints of self-appointed saviors. Talk about what it's like as screenwriters to, in movies that are comic book adaptations, keep theme alive and write thematically.
I don't, and I hate writing from theme. I hate thinking about theme. I think if you're a halfway decent writer, you will find it as you go, and it'll make itself known to you. We had a moment on, I'll try to be very fast, there's a moment on History where the studio had wanted a character written into the script, which wasn't bad, and I put him into it. And when I first met with Cronenberg and we sat down to start going through the script, the first thing he said to me, and I think he was sort of testing to see how we'd get along, which turned out great. First thing he said is, I can't stand this character. We need to get rid of him. He's all theme. And I agreed entirely because he was a character who had been brutalized in the Vietnam War and was now this bitter and he was all theme. And
Wait, he was Maria Bello's dad.
Maria Bello's dad, yeah, it was this character. We kept laughing about how he just screwed Robert Duvall out of a part, but it was like he was this sort of character who would just sort of show up every now and then and go, I am theme, I am violence, I am...
So you don't like to write from theme, but you're like fine with other people finding in your work.
Yeah, it's fine. It always sort of cracked me up that people would, some of my favorite reviews of History were a couple of the bad ones that at least got the film, because people would focus on you're talking about violence in America. I'm like, no, we're not. There's nothing left to say about violence in America. We're talking about identity and the nature of relationships, and are you who you say you are, or are you who you really are, and what does that mean? And and then we had a lot of people shooting each other in the middle, but. There's nothing much to say.
And there's this sex scene on the stairs.
Is it about sex?
Which is violent and...
Well, wait a minute.
It's such a thematically strong movie.
But actually
it's there. Yeah,
the two sex scenes are about identity. She shows up as a cheerleader.
They're exactly about identity.
Yeah, that was identity.
At one point, even to the point that she's wearing costumes and
she is wearing
they're trying to reenact the teenage years they missed, and then later on it's about a woman who gets to have sex with a stranger, even though it's her husband.
It really was about them.
So, all that stuff is there, and if you're tapped into your story, and if you're telling it right, and if you're, moving along those rails, you don't have to worry. I had somebody once say to me, whenever I get stuck, actually he didn't say, he was advising me, he said, whenever you get stuck, just go back to your theme, that will guide you. And I remember sitting there going, I don't know what the theme is until about 3 years after it's done. So it doesn't work for me. I usually, I feel like, this is not to say there aren't great writers who do this, but there are plenty of bad writers who do. I can tell when I'm watching a bad writer who knows what his theme is and won't let go of it, because it gets fucking boring, man. It's just like every scene's about your theme and blah, blah, blah.
All right, fair enough. Hayter, there's so much thematic overtures in the graphic novel, and boiling any of it down into the movie was an accomplishment. What was that kind of battle like to keep theme alive, or did you not? Like the way that Olson approached the work, and you never thought about it?
Well, listen, I used to feel very strongly about theme until 5 seconds ago. I actually have the exact opposite view from Josh. And have you seen History of Violence? That's all. I got to spit
up on the stage. I'm sorry.
Oh, that was fantastic.
Spit all over Josh Olson. Wow, that's never happened. All right, sorry about
that. I'm stunned because History of Violence is so thematically strong. And
absolutely.
Now listen, I do agree that if you're trying to illustrate your theme through the whole movie, you're going to be writing a bad movie. Should I back away? I need a. Does anybody have a tarp?
I am not going to drink water again.
Anybody have some water balloons?
But I totally agree with this hack that Josh was talking to. I would rather, and I'll take it. I haven't seen Transformers 2. I'm sure it's excellent.
You know it sucks.
No, I know. By
the way, hit those guys again.
Stay on theme. Come on,
Right.
We're in the lightning round, and we got to open up.
Okay. Listen,
don't harp on Transformers. Theme.
Stick with the theme.
Stick with the theme.
Don't rush me, man. I'll kill you. They know who I am. Well. Theme. I believe. Listen, here's the flip side of it. If you're writing a movie and you're just going from action sequence to action sequence, and you don't know who your characters are, and you don't care, and you're just trying to get to the next big fight,
made a Michael Bay movie
or whatever, then you're not going to be making a very good movie. So, like everything in life, it's about walking the middle road. Finding your theme, knowing what it is, will help inform how to present your characters. But if you are hammering the audience over the head with it, it's going to be boring. It's just going to be a philosophical exercise in boredom and horror. But I would rather, if I were writing a movie like History of Violence, I would say to myself, okay, who is this guy? What does it mean to have a history of violence? What does it mean to have been this and to become this, and then to be pulled back to your original point?
That's character.
Yeah, well, I think the character should be interwoven into everything. Your character,
sure.
There is no argument to me between character over plot. If they're not completely interwoven, it's not gonna. Well, it could fly, but it doesn't fly for me. And so I think theme, character, plot, all that stuff, it needs to be present throughout. And you just need to learn subtlety, and you need to learn how to express things in a way that is cool but doesn't bash people over the head. So
I'm not saying the stuff's not there. I'm just saying there's and it's all different approaches. I mean, there's
it should just all be cool.
Yeah, just make it cool.
All be cool.
That's all.
And have giant robots preferably. Hit those people.
I smell History of Violence too, the plot breaking out here. Gregory, from the executive level, I've met execs that really spaz out when anyone even tries to discuss theme with them, and I've met execs saying that they crave it and they don't see it enough. What's been your viewpoint and kind of the DC take, because it's in your property?
When you look at a property, the only way in order to sort of protect the integrity of a property is to really distill it down to what it's about. So Spider-Man is not about the fact that Peter Parker actually built his wrist, his web slingers. So it's okay that they change it to sort of a genetic thing, because that's not what it's about. It's a coming of age story, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where you can find your license. But that's but otherwise, you never start off a pitch or a creative meeting talking about the theme. What ends up happening is, as you build the story, you start to find, between yourself and the writer and the filmmakers, you start to distill it down to what it's about. I mean, it's true. These guys have been through it a million times in the development process. You start looking at each scene, saying, does this scene have relevance to the movie? If it's just something that's cool that we've thrown in there, but it doesn't get you anywhere or come from anywhere, then lose it. And a lot of times you end up losing stuff that, seems really cool, but then you realize, well, it has no bearing on the character, has no bearing on the plot, has no bearing on what the movie's about. So you end up losing it. So that's, at least for me, that's where I end up, the theme is something that you end up sort of discovering after the fact, but it's kind of like, what's the movie about? Like, every scene is kind of there, and then at a certain point you realize, all of these scenes kind of have this little germ that kind of relate back to this original idea, and then you feel like you're probably on the right path, I think. Yep. If that makes any sense.
One last question before we open it to the crowd. Really fast, lightning question. Even though it's a big topic, I'm going to walk you through the big hit points. Josh, you scripted. Endings are important in films, and both you and Hayter made significant changes to the original property while still keeping its integrity alive. Josh, you scripted a very action-heavy approach in which gas tanks were blowing up, and there was a bigger gunfight in your original draft, which Cronenberg and you collaborated on to tone down and change. Talk about getting away from that action-heavy ending and how you were still able to keep your integrity alive of what you were shooting for with the project.
Yeah, but that's not the ending of the film. That's the last gunfight. That's a whole different thing. We originally had a giant squid that...
we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, getting that perfect ending.
That's just a fight scene that when you're writing that kind of stuff, it's, I sat there, I'm writing a gunfight that I know full well we're going to get to the set. There's nothing integral to the gunfight, that ties into the rest of the film. It's just, hey, there's a gunfight. I know it's going to get changed to some degree, and depending on the kind of film it ends up being. So that wasn't a big deal. The interesting thing about history was the actual ending of the film, which has anybody here seen it?
The silence. The silence was in your script.
Yeah, the whole like the smash cut from nothing. I mean, that was from my original.
Otacon.
Your phone? That was in my original pitch, and it always knocked me out that, it had nothing to do with any of the book, that the studio, I kept waiting for the studio to tell me you've got to go out with a more definite ending, and they never said a word, but...
it's a brilliant final moment.
But to me, the important thing about that is, as pertains to endings, to me, the plot was over. And that was, we're done, and there are questions about the characters and where they're going to go from here, and the important thing is to, this isn't my job to answer these questions, it's a sort of, we throw it out, and it gives the audience something to kind of connect to and think about. Are these people going to go on together? Where are they going to go from here? And slowly in the process of talking about that and thinking about that, you're actually sort of applying it to your own life and sort of kind of figuring your own shit out, which is, I like movies that do that. I like movies that leave you with a question at the end.
Cool. Hayter, we've talked about this a lot, the squid ending in our Watchmen podcast, but I just want to hit one thing again. And first off, the internet movie that had Hitler upset that the squid was not in
I saw
the
that.
Watchmen
That was
the
great.
silliest thing I've ever seen.
Oh, I love that.
You'd originally said that You'd originally said that the idea of getting away, that helped you get away from the squid, was when you were working on Watchmen with Darren Aronofsky and a friend of his who I believe was the co-writer of The Fountain.
Yeah, you're not right.
I'm not right. Okay, but you still don't know the name, do you?
Huh?
Do you know who it was?
I did know I found out the name, and didn't I call you and tell you what it was?
No.
Yeah, no, he's a physics professor or something.
So you don't know the name. All right, so anyhow,
it was just some guy who was a Watchmen fan and a friend of Darren's, and said, I think this is the key. And I was like,
because Dr. Manhattan was the deterrent, the concept of using him against them. So one question, I just want you to tell people again, your original concept I really loved, in which Dr. Manhattan addresses the world, makes a speech kind of like The Day the Earth Stood Still of warning.
Right.
In the final movie, and I know you were gone by then, they took out that speech, they excised it. Talk about what you were going for in that speech of warning, and just kind of, you don't have to say about getting away from the squid, because we've heard that.
Yeah, well, I felt that thematically... this guy...
The speech.
There was a speech. Yeah, I'm getting there.
No.
Listen.
They keep flashing me 9 minutes. 9 minutes.
4 o'clock in the morning. Me and Guys Baltar are walking down the street talking about Watchmen. I felt that, first of all, if you blow up the middle of a bunch of cities in the world, or New York, let's say, that's not necessarily going to cause world peace. I don't understand why, and clearly, as we've had events similar, what it does is it causes people to freak out and go on a killing spree. So I didn't feel that it would work unless you have Dr. Manhattan saying to people, what he's talking about is I wrote a speech where he sort of appears in. I had 9 cities being attacked around the world, and he appears and he says, for years I've watched you people kill each other, walk down the path to self-destruction, and that ends now. From this minute on, your armies will stand down. You will get along with each other. You will dismantle your nuclear arsenals. From this minute on, I will be watching. And that, to me, was the point of the movie. and he... The idea was, as opposed to the squid, which was a sort of a random attack from an alien force that supposedly made everybody go, hey, let's all be nice to each other now. And I'm not dogging Watchmen, the graphic novel, I love it. But I felt that it needed to be set. You really need to, if you're going to convince the human race of something, you really need to lay it out for them.
In your draft, in the comic, it was shocking with all the carnage scene, all the dead bodies. Was that in your draft? Because a lot of people commented in the movie that it was very strange to see just not a single dead body. And it's not like Zach couldn't have gotten away with it after the body count of 300.
Or the previous violence that went through the film.
It was strange to see that also excised. So you don't know what happened. That wasn't in your draft either.
No, to me, I pitched the movie. We did the deal, and then 9/11 happened. And
you signed your contract on September 10th, 2001.
Yeah, that's right. I signed my contract on September 10th, 2001. And the next day, the whole world changed, and I didn't even. I'm a fairly edgy character, but even I didn't feel like I wanted to see piles of dead bodies in the middle of Times Square. And what I wanted to see was people turn to shadows, the Hiroshima shadows, because that's referenced in the book. And I thought it would be very creepy to see those bodies, but to see them as just charcoal outlines on walls.
Cool.
And that's sort of how I envision it.
Gregory, your take on losing the squid and kind of the loss of especially that Manhattan speech in the ending?
Yeah.
And somebody lined up with a mic. We'll take one question from the crowd.
Yeah. This
shit. They'll hang out for a minute or two after.
The squid's not kosher, so.
All right, what about the loss of
I had no problem.
What about the loss of Hayter's speech? Do you remember when that happened? And no bodies.
I don't remember when it happened. I remember it in his draft that I had read and just somewhere in the development process, because it went through a couple of back and forths between the studio and Zach. God bless Zach, because Zach's whole thing, starting with keep it in 1985, keep this, keep that, keep that, keep that. So. But I don't remember when we lost it.
Yeah, and none of this is a repudiation of Zach. Zach is amazing, and he kept it true. And
I was just curious.
A minor difference of opinion on that is just the natural thing, but it's not to diss Zach. I think he's amazing.
These guys will hang out for a minute or two afterwards. Please tell us your name, where you're from, and what your question is.
My name's Justin. I'm from Hollister, California, and I have a question in regards to more into pitching ideas. When they released the Doom movie. The gentleman that wrote the movie actually issued a public apology on his blog saying,
"Smart man.
I had written this original script. It was close to the source material. You guys would have loved it. When I pitched it, the executives took it and they just burgered the whole thing." What sort of creative control do you guys have as the project goes on to ensure that they're not just going to tear it apart and, it's Transformers 2 and we're going to throw in a scene where there's robot heaven? Like, how do you guys stop that kind of stuff from happening?
Is that the only bad thing in Transformers 2?
Well, amongst others.
Hit him.
There's no control.
There's no control.
Even the reason that the big directors get the big money to direct the big movies is because a huge movie like that is a runaway train, and it takes a very special set of skills to be able to master and ride a runaway train. In the smaller movies, you have a lot more control, but at a certain point, it's all in the director and the studio's hands, and even they have a limited amount of control at a certain point. Yeah. It's just I always like in great filmmaking to really, it's like a game of pachinko. You got all these balls at the top and all these things, and every now and then 1 out of 100 kind of hit the right hole on the target. Everyone's trying real hard. Does that reassure you?
Yeah. Unfortunately,
now,
not while Michael Bay's still out there.
Gregory is an executive, so he has a mite more control. We are writers, and my movies have made a lot of money, and Josh has. Did you win the Oscar? I'm sorry. I don't
No, I happily lost to Larry McMurtry, one of the greatest American writers.
A great honor, and
easy to lose. Yeah.
so Josh and I are immensely powerful writers, which means we have zero say over the final decisions in the film. You either have the studio dictating what's going to happen, or you have an exceptionally strong director who's able to just say, no, we're doing it this way.
I've been given the signal, but I want to give you guys a chance to tell us what you're working on now, really quick, going down the line. What are you working on now? What do you want to promote?
I am doing. I'll do that too. I'm doing a Jack Reacher book by Lee Child called One Shot for Paramount. They're hoping to turn it into a franchise. It's great fun, kind of old school, Dirty Harry meets Travis McGee, tough guy thing. I'll give out cards. I'm on Trailers from Hell, which is Joe Dante's website. It's a great place for geeks like me and Eli Roth and Edgar Wright and Joe and other people do commentary on great trailers for movies we love that you may not be familiar with. It's worth checking out.
Great site. Hayter.
Come on down.
Yeah,
You just formed a new company.
I'm not working on anything. No, I just formed a new company, Dark Hero Studios, and we have a number of. I have a bunch of things I'm working on. I just did Lost Planet for Warner Brothers, which was a pretty cool film. So hopefully they'll get on that. And apart from that, I don't know, a bunch of stuff.
Gregory.
Green Lantern First Flight in stores Tuesday, July 28th on Green Ray DVD. Superman, Batman, Public Enemy September 29th on Blu-ray. Jonah
Gregory.
Hex next summer.
Nice.
Green Lantern, Hawk and Dove.
Wait. What about some of the old Vertigo classics? Sandman, anything? Preacher, anything?
Well, Preacher's development is Sony. Sandman is in a dreamlike state, which will lead to a phenomenal, ephemeral, appearance.
JLA on hold?
What?
Teen Titans? Ouch. Teen Titans, anything new?
Right one.
Anything new with Teen Titans?
Ouch.
Nothing new with Teen Titans. I'll tell you, though, if you guys get all those surveys and they say, what do you want to see? Don't say Superman and Batman. You're going to get Superman and Batman. You want Teen Titans? Tell us you want Teen Titans.
I have creative screenwriting magazines for the first 50 of you. Give it up to Josh Olson, David Hayter, and Gregory Noveck.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to Josh Olson, David Hayter, and Gregory Noveck, and don't forget to stay tuned for more amazing Comic-Con coverage. If you dug this episode of the podcast in general, consider tossing a virtual tip into our PayPal virtual tip jar by visiting www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com and look for the PayPal icon. Your tips are appreciated and definitely help out with equipment, hard drives, and all the other stuff we need to keep this podcast running. Of course, feel free to check out my blog, which I even managed to update on the rare occasion that I have time to do so by visiting www.jeffgoldsmith.blogspot.com. You can also always feel free to drop me a line by emailing me at yo.goldsmith@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button in iTunes or your podcatching software, because that's how episodes are downloaded automatically every time you click refresh. And if you have a minute, feel free to leave us positive feedback in the iTunes Music Store or at podcastalley.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, thanking you again for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.